The only feature that was objectively better in Overwatch 2 was the shop. Our career profiles are gone. We lost all of our stats. Your border is gone in game. The gameplay is worse in general and more dumbed down. PvE didn't come out. They didn't even promise it. It was the worst reviewed game on Steam of all time, and you're gonna tell me my comment is self-serving? What? I didn't realize I was playing Among Us. We've got an imposter, boys. These guys, over the years, have made fantastic videos about a ton of esports, and their coverage of Overwatch has been very brutally honest and great. I love their channel. Be sure to go sub to them. Let's react to this video. Okay.
Overwatch was this very successful game. Global, people loved it.
You know, nobody anticipated how meaningful and big the success of the game would be, obviously.
When it was announced that Blizzard was starting Overwatch League, obviously everyone was very excited.
I think it was initially pitched as like, you know, NFL for esports.
Yeah, that's our vision for how we're going to celebrate and reward our players, is build a league that is like the NFL, only global.
And it could have worked too. They just fucked up the game.
On his own. And the Spitfire are coming through with this one. Prophet finds 5 kills on this Tracer. And you better believe that's enough.
Personally, I was a little bit worried because it sounded like a logistical nightmare.
There was conversations of people being like, they have to be having a hard time setting this up.
So I think over time, the league lost a lot of its personality. Like, it just started to feel very bland.
Cancel culture did not help either.
You want your team to win, right? They're going to have to play what's better.
From the viewing perspective, it was certainly boring to see the same heroes, in, you know, on every map in every match, right?
I was not able to speak publicly about Owl while I worked at Twitch, but you better believe that I was the guy in every f***ing meeting going, this is stupid and you're all stupid.
At a certain point, I'm like, what the hell do you people want?
Frat boy culture. That is how Activision Blizzard
this doesn't matter to
being
League,
described here in this new lawsuit.
The danger here is YouTube go.
The irony is, by the way, I'm gonna pause it right quick. Like, the frat boy culture of Blizzard was definitely not in Overwatch. So people pointing to the suit, like, dude, the NFL gets sued all the fucking time, right? Like there's the shit that those players do and still play is crazy, right? I don't think that suit had anything to do with the league's failure, and I think it's important to note that.
You know what? We don't want to be associated with you because T-Mobile don't want to be associated with you. Coke don't want to be associated with you.
And do you want to know why? Do you want to know why? By the way, I bet you anything. And here's the reality of the corporate world, chat. Money talks, okay? If the league was doing the numbers that it promised, ain't no way those sponsors pull out. Ain't no way. Because litigations and suits in these companies, while Blizzard's was bad, it had nothing to do with Overwatch, and Team 4 had nothing to come up in the suit. So the suit had nothing to do with the failure of the league. The failure of the league was because the direction they designed the game went directly against the interest of the esport, in that if you want a game to be a successful esport, you have to cater to the competitive scene. And the heroes they continuously added, Moira, Brig, and never addressed or fixed, went directly against that. Team 4's vision for the game and Jeff Kaplan's vision for the game, that he directly said, we want to make a complicated game at first and make it easier for people over time, goes against the interest of an esport. Because why would I sit down and invest 1,000 hours into Genji to become the best Genji player when some kid can pick Moira and beat me in a one-on-one with no skill? You'll never have an esport succeed with that type of game. Period. End of story.
We were running into walls, like it was just double shield. There was no hope.
In the midst of that, they were behind the scenes working on a not sequel, then sequel, everything changed kind of thing.
There is a community that wants a lot of Overwatch 1 back, and they think a lot of the magic was lost in 5.5. I think more and more people will start to realize maybe we did have it better.
There was no need for Overwatch 2. Oh, there's me. It was a cash grab marketing scam that made them abandon the first game for years.
It is kind of like a perfect storm of that would kill an esports league.
It's insane how many bad decisions Overwatch League made over the years.
Ad. Now let's go to Overwatch. I don't think that because Overwatch died. Agreed.
17 years since Blizzard opened the door to a new adventure. And my friends, the wait ends right now.
Overwatch. Soldiers, scientists, adventurers, When Overwatch was released on May 24th, 2016, it was something new. A MOBA-style hero shooter that rolled many of gaming's favorite elements into one mind-blowing offering.
It felt like sort of return to the Saturday morning cartoon heroes of like, you know, my childhood and all that.
Facts.
Like ability shooters are common now, but at the time that was still something that was relatively new. And I think it wasn't just me. I think the gaming community in general was very excited about it.
There was a palpable sense of excitement, and before long, Overwatch blew up, both in terms of active player base and the hours they spent playing the game.
More than 7 million players have joined Overwatch's fight for the future.
Across all 3 platforms, 119 million hours of the game have been played since launch on May 24th.
It's so smooth, it's so fresh, it's so dynamic, it's so responsive. It's just absolutely ridiculous on every level. I mean, it is my favorite game. It goes without saying. This is my favorite game right now.
Overwatch was designed with esports in mind. And from the very beginning, some regional competitions like Apex Korea showed us just what was possible in this new game. But all of them were eventually absorbed by Blizzard in preparation for the launch of the Overwatch League.
We designed Overwatch from the ground up to excel as a competitive game. We're looking for the top players.
You just have to laugh at them saying that, man. You just have to laugh. Are you guys seeing this? Like, and this is what I've been saying for years, and I'm sticking to my guns. They had no idea what they were making. They would say one thing and do another, then never go back and fix the mistake they made and try a Band-Aid solution later. Like, guys, eventually, when you keep pushing your dirty laundry to the closet, eventually, you're going to have to open up your closet and go do your laundry. But they've just kept punting, they're doing their laundry, kicking the clothes in the closet for years and years and years. And again, by the way, Briggs still fundamentally the same. She broke the entire game. I'm not saying Briggs should get nerfed or anything like that right now, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is, like, if they wanted the lead to succeed and Overwatch was designed to be a competitive game, then they would have gone back and actually changed these characters. But the game, they've tried to make it more and more casual because that's the easiest way for them to make money while being the laziest as possible. And so instead of going back and ever addressing any of these problems. And the reason why Team 4, I don't think, will ever be able to address these problems is because, one, the personnel who were there who made the problems are gone. Two, they've never been incentivized to go fix it, and they've never taken the initiative to. Like, so many of these abilities should have been changed and heroes should have been changed, but they just don't care to do it, right? Because that wasn't their vision for Overwatch. So they'll say one thing and do another, and that's a really consistent theme. And if you really break down piece by piece the process, really from it started in 2017 with Moira, but what really broke it first was that Moth meta, and after that in Season 7, there was just no coming back from that.
In the world and the team owners who will form the Overwatch League. There will be regular schedules, professional contracts, free agency, baseline
it could have worked.
Salaries and benefits, providing more stability for teams and players.
When it was announced that Blizzard was starting Overwatch League, obviously everyone was very excited. Everyone thought it was going to be a huge step forward for esports. It was definitely seen as this moment where esports was going to become legit, because that's obviously something esports has struggled with for a long time. And they had this talk of like, we're going to have 50K minimum salaries, and you know, the players are going to have healthcare and pensions, and you know, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be this huge scale thing.
These guys are getting paid to do this. The league minimum is 50 grand a year?
Yes.
And how high does it go potentially?
So there currently isn't a salary cap. So the scale is as good as, and is to me,
as good as the game.
The players.
Now, so Overwatch League, is that like, Mike, is that like the NFL? Like, is that today's version of the NFL, only an online
yeah,
game?
Megan, this is how they've dialed it up. I mean, they're now envisioning Boston playing against New York, or Boston playing against Houston, and Miami playing against Houston.
And that was lit.
Players,
and that was lit, by the way.
Scene,
that was lit.
It was lit. Opportunities
it was awesome.
And glory. And chasing a different kind of opportunity, investors began to pour in as well.
Once I think the Kraft Group came on and officially became the backers of the Boston Uprising, then it was kind of like, oh, this is big. And I'm pretty sure that the Kraft Group then kind of like, you know how millionaires are, they all hang out together, I guess. And they were like, oh, I own an esports team, you should own an esports.
Billionaires. Billionaires Boys Club. It's the Billionaires Boys Club. And they have so much money they could throw at it. They don't give a shit.
Esports team, and they all got around and started buying and paying for esports teams, and that's when it was kind of like, oh, we have like something really, really big here, and it's bigger
And it could
than
have
I think
been.
anybody
It absolutely
thought.
could have been.
This is being touted as the next NFL compared to the Premier
Bobby,
League
bro.
of the future. What's your vision for this? Is that for real?
Yeah, that's our vision for how we're going to celebrate and reward our players, is build a league that is like the NFL, only global. And it's going to take some time, but what will make it really easy is having great partners like Robert Kraft.
As far as
You know what's ironic about this? If you wanted the Overwatch League to be the NFL, do you know what's so ironic about this? The NFL is the NFL because football, from a grassroots perspective, is ingrained into American culture. Anybody who has grown up in the Southeast knows how religious SEC football is. It's religious down here. I grew up in Lexington, so I grew up like at UK, and we were the bottom of the barrel for the SEC when I grew up. But I still remember hearing the announcements at the stadium, "First down, Kentucky." Like, from the time you're born, like, you're ingrained into that culture. And football, like, every Friday night in high school to, which I didn't even have a football team in high school, to Saturdays college, Sundays NFL. Like, there's a very clear ecosystem to get up to it. And the sport of football, not just the NFL, is ingrained into every person's everyday life. But the way they took Overwatch is that they didn't make the game rewarding because of these brain-dead characters they continuously added, and they took the game away from the kind of system that would foster the Overwatch League's success. My hot take is that the Overwatch League had no chance of succeeding because of the direction that Overwatch went. It had nothing to do with what the league operations were. It was doomed to fail anyway because of the direction Kaplan and Team 4 were going to take Overwatch. Was Kotick any better? No, he was very wrong too. I'm not trying to blame it all on Team 4, but my point is, even if like the upper ends of Activision didn't mess like a bunch of this stuff up and just go into disarray over the years, it wouldn't have mattered and the league wouldn't have been that because the direction that Overwatch ended up going regardless.
Actually valuing the franchise.
Like, what did it cost you to start the franchise roughly, and what do you think it's worth right now, a short time later?
It's been reported within like the $20 million range for the first teams. That's fairly accurate, but that's not what you would actually pay.
You think you could sell it for a lot more than that now, though?
Absolutely.
For the fans, though, it wasn't just about the money. This was the dawn of a new era, an enormous new offering, and the people were here for it.
113 players from 19 countries.
This was lit when everybody was here.
With this single goal to be crowned the Season 1 champion.
This was lit when everybody was here.
Finally over. It's time to kick off the inaugural season of the Overwatch League.
But it looks like the Boston
Who are the Bengals of the Overwatch League? Probably Florida Mayhem.
Duel one again. Philadelphia Fusion. Oh, it's going to come out on top. Striker though lands a big triple on the barrage there. The Graviton helping.
Like this play.
Both supports are caught together. That's what they needed. But Carpe strikes in again. Striking down. Killing's also being removed. Carpe, what are you doing? This is unbelievable.
You never see those big 6Ks in Overwatch 2.
Another hack trying to come through from Hydra.
They lowered the ceiling of the game.
We know how devastating the hack is now. This Fisher is like, get it, son! The map, and he's he's got another jump. He gets knocked back, barraged in. This is a bit ballsy. Fisher takes him down. Nobody got the light, Fisher.
Not many Widowmakers would go for this play.
Look at how different this game is, chat, by the way.
Just absolutely nails it here. Even the machine gun, what a flick. And another beautiful.
Yeah,
it was initially
why
pitched as like,
have players like that doing that when you can put Brig in the game? Do you see what I'm saying? Brigitte is the hero that destroyed all of this. Brigitte single-handedly destroyed this. And the balance team tried to nerf her 26 straight times, fucked up every time, changed the format twice into Overwatch 2, and Brig was still meta in the betas for the first season of Overwatch League and Overwatch 2. The balance team destroyed the ability for the league to succeed. And the game design, they took the game, fucked it more than anything.
you know, NFL for esports. And it seemed a little far-fetched, but there was some part of you that wanted to believe that. I still remember the moment of loading up opening night. I think it was San Francisco versus
Brig destroyed Widow?
Valiant
Yes,
or
she
something?
did. Because she made brawl comps and goats far superior than any DPS in the game just by existing on the point, by proccing your Inspire. She countered DPS. So Brig did kill Widow because Brig made heroes like Widow unpickable. Yes, 100%.
300K viewers on Twitch, and like the show's getting started up, and it's hard to see that number and not be like, dang, this really could be something.
Oh, the inaugural season was just unmatched. The energy that it brought, all the new
So
fans
lit.
it brought in, because it not only brought new fans to the game, but to competitive esports in general.
Okay, I like this for the Gladiators. This is cute. They're gonna try and circle around. The Spitfire, want to interrupt this a little bit here. Where are you going?
Dude, like this was like, look at this shit. You never see this anymore. Look at the depth. Look at the depth of the game in 6v6. It's not as.
Makes me laugh, makes me happy, and Sean Paul switches to the Widowmaker at just the right time. Closer drops
What they do to
down,
my
and
fucking
it's a day
game,
in the
man.
shooting range for Lane Roberts.
But in spite of all the excitement, passionate fans, and avid supporters, there were questions too. Blizzard was promising more than any esports league in history.
You know what they did? The equivalent of what they did, chat? It'd be like if basketball removed the three-point line because they don't want shooters like Steph Curry beating on some fucking college kid or some high school kid. That's the equivalent of what they did.
Based model with home and away games, new stadiums, and more infrastructure than anything that had come before. Could they really pull it off?
You know, we think with the Overwatch League and the city-based format, which is not just unique for esports, you know, a league where Shanghai plays Los Angeles in the regular season has never been done in sports either. It's really the first of its kind, and we think it's going to be something really special for a lot of years to come.
Personally, I was a little bit worried because it sounded like a logistical nightmare. They were aiming very high, and being able to reach to the goal that they wanted with everybody just traveling, considering the logistical nightmares, again, as I said earlier, with the venues, with visas, with preparations and so on, it was a tough dream to achieve.
There's obviously a huge fan base out there that wants to engage with this content live, wants to go and attend events and feel like they're a part of the global community celebrating the best gamers in the world.
Overwatch is a global sport, right? Overwatch is a game that's played all over the world. That's why it was important to us to have a global league. We have a huge audience in the US, but we also have a huge audience in China and Korea and France and Germany and the UK, Brazil, all over the world.
It was just really getting hyped up to a point of like, this has got to be bigger. And I think even though there was conversations after the announcement, when they got kind of quiet, there was conversations of people being like, they have to be having a hard time setting this up logistically and money-wise and selling it to people.
But in the early years, the league blew up. New and returning fans tuned in and fell in love with something genuinely hype.
Is this the secret weapon for the London Spitfire? Is this the answer to their problem? Neptuno's down again. That heralds disaster generally for the Fusion, and Carpe wasn't far behind. Prophet with 3. He's killed 4 players now on his own. And the Spitfire are coming through with this one. Prophet finds 5 kills.
That was so fucked up, man.
Now
I remember watching this. I remember watching that and like being a smaller streamer at the time and being like, you know what? These KFC raps are really good, by the way. I remember watching that and being like, dude, like, you know what? I would love to play like that. Like making a league was never my goal, but like seeing that is what made me want to play in contenders. And like I was coming in like in the middle of Goats meta, and I just remember being like, yeah, like I want to be great. That was so fucking inspiring. And then they just
Overwatch as a game was struggling more and more with balance and meta issues, and slowly but surely souring
Tracer
the fan
gameplay
base.
like that less than 1 plat Brig. Literally, yes. Like they made Brig beat that. It literally was the equivalent of them taking Steph Curry and making him as good as an elementary school basketball player. It's embarrassing what they did to this game.
On the league. And a particularly notorious offender was Goats.
As we saw sort of season 2 come around and, you know, players starting to really orbit around a very safe way to play, we had the Goats meta spawn, which was a composition that featured no DPS players.
I think we're just going to focus on basics, you know, just
Zach!
Goats. And
this is just still the standoff
Zach,
between
I
both
fucking
of
love
these
Zach.
teams, but London with that sound barrier looking to end this fight.
Shatter, such sustain. There's no one is dying anywhere on this. Birdwing's got another grab, the second into the fight. Gonna catch several again. Follow-up still not quite there. Transcendence able to keep him alive. And now finally someone dies, and it happens to be Prophet.
And that's Goats in a nutshell.
From the viewing perspective, it was certainly boring to see the same heroes, in, you know, on every map in every match, right? You know, I do feel like that's something.
Game dev problem. Game dev problem, which, by the way, people from that same system are now in charge of lead hero balance. So just throwing that out there, letting people know that it's still the same people that did all this.
Could have been dealt with a lot sooner than it was. You know, we needed a patch, and it didn't come. for whatever reason.
We do see the Outlaws are going to pull out.
We needed a patch that didn't come for whatever reason. Do you want to know why? Do you want to know why that patch didn't come? Because this is what Jeff Kaplan and Jeff Goodman wanted. They directly said this was their mission statement. The mission statement from them goes against this league's entire existence. Doomed to fail.
One of the things that Outlaws fans have been waiting for is a good tracer player on Houston. It's Jake on the far. This combo's worked well for them before, but as soon as they see the defensive setup, they will just simply swap it away. Crucial time lost here for the Outlaws.
Kaplan's accountable for this, by the way.
The fans here in the studio give their opinion.
Well, you know, you want your team to win, right? They're going to have to play what's meta.
Chat, I cannot imagine what it's like to be a pro player right now. Chat,
It was miserable. It was miserable.
People and pro players scrim this meta probably 6 to 8 hours a day.
And I think that after
Our players had like 3 scrim blocks, and contenders we had 2 scrim blocks plus VOD reviews plus mandatory ranked every day plus my stream. So when I was playing goats and coming up into contenders, and we scrimmed a couple out teams too. I mean, my schedule was I'd wake up at about 10 a.m. and stream from about 10 to 2 p.m., get lunch, chill, get ready from scrims either 4 to 8 p.m. with VOD review after, or 6 to 10 p.m. with VOD review after. And then I'd have to get my videos out too. So it quite literally was playing Brig 24/7. I remember at the time, it was so stressful for me, and I had to walk out of one of the blocks, and I talked to Zachary about it, and I was like, dude, like, how the fuck do you deal with this mentally, man? Like, this shit is miserable, because like my role were the Brig players, so like the most hated character that I despise, I had to learn if I wanted to make it as a pro player, and at the time, I had an offer from Facebook Gaming to like be an exclusive streamer. So like I was looking at my YouTube channel, trying to calculate like the worth for them to get me exclusively on top of scrims. And like I was out like walking at night at like 11 or 12 p.m. or 11 p.m. or like midnight, just trying to like get my head straight and figure things out and like talk to my grandpa and figure out what I wanted to do. And it was just so stressful. But all those memories are coming back watching all this.
While we realized it was maybe not really conducive to exciting gameplay, or at least a varied, array of different gameplay styles. So there's definitely a dark patch in Season 2 where DPS were not necessary.
GOATS wasn't the only thing the community found repetitive, though. As the Overwatch League became more and more commercialized, some players and teams began to feel redundant. That personal touch, the magic that drew in so many people at the start,
is gone.
Was beginning to fade.
It was gone.
So I think over time,
there were no DPS heroes in the
league lost a lot of its personality. Like it just started to feel very bland, and like there were so many teams as well. There's like 20 teams, and it was just like,
that didn't matter.
Do I care about Team 18 playing Team 17? No, not really. And even again, like I said, there wasn't much to distinguish that match from any other match.
More and more people began to feel that the fan experience just wasn't the same, and negative sentiments began to spread.
The game became about denial rather than playmaking.
Some people started to question the future of the whole enterprise.
And they just tripled down on this.
I've seen people say, well, GOATS is dead, and now it's just double sniper, and that's going to be terrible. Or, oh, now everybody's just going to play McCree. And at a certain point, I'm like, what the hell do you people want?
So, in other words, you don't want him to eat all the ults in the game like D.Va.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There are these moments of regret that you have as a game developer.
That's fair.
And
I like
eating everybody's ult is...
Listen. I love Jeff, by the way. I love Jeff Kaplan. I think he's a great guy, and I think he's instrumental to Overwatch's success. But what needed to happen is he needed to oversee a team of people that had the proper understanding of this level of play and the direction the game should be in terms of playmaking. And they needed to stop doing their 2000s to 2010s game design model of that complicated game and making it easier over time. Like, the reality is there was a major shift in gaming and what people wanted. And there was a bunch of mechanical crackheads, specifically on PC and mouse and keyboard like me, that grew up wanting to play this style of gaming that, frankly, didn't really exist even 5 years before it, because most people were still on controller, and this was a very new thing, and it was very different. And the old heads, frankly, just didn't understand it. It was the changing of the guard, if you will. And I love Jeff, and I think if he had employed a team of people that understood this, all of this would have been avoided. But it's unlucky.
It's one of those.
But there was a big change on the horizon for the Overwatch League. Just not one that any of the fans wanted. The decision to take the league's broadcasts from Twitch to YouTube was instantly controversial, especially after reports that they left a $90 million deal behind.
The Twitch deal collapses, and then what Blizzard do is a deal with YouTube to put everything exclusively on YouTube, which caused a ton of problems. Because really, you want your esport on Twitch, if I'm totally honest.
I was not able to speak publicly about OWL while I worked at Twitch for obvious reasons. But you better believe that I was the guy in every fucking meeting going, this is stupid and you're all stupid. It did not feel good. I'll tell you why it didn't feel good. Because that league cost a lot of fucking money, and a year later, 11 of my fucking staff was laid off.
Overwatch had the...
People don't know this. I believe this is true, so I'm going to need some people out there on the internet to fact check this for me. The deal for YouTube Gaming and Overwatch League, and I actually, believe it or not, I was one of the top 5 biggest streamers on YouTube at the time. I actually had a one-on-one meeting with Triumph's lead and the head of YouTube Gaming in a call. And I talked to them. I was curious if they were looking to sign more streamers, because they signed a bunch. They said no. And I talked to him a lot about the Overwatch League. I've never told people about this meeting publicly, but I met with the head of YouTube Gaming, and he was a really nice guy. He's not there anymore. And I remember talking to him. I was like, yo, like, you should follow Crimzo's story, because Crimzo at the time was coming up from Contenders to Overwatch League. And I was like, hey, if you want to document like esports on YouTube, and this is right when YouTube TV was starting, he was talking to me about YouTube, like wanting to go more into YouTube TV, which is a big thing now. This was probably about 5 years ago. No, it was 4 years ago. This was 2019, 2020. So it's about Kotick needing cloud help. It wasn't about OWL. It was about Kotick needing cloud help with the company overall. Yes, AWS and Google versus Google, basically. Uncle C, you are completely right. People don't know this. That deal was a bundle deal with not only Overwatch League and CDL, but Google Cloud became the hosting service
going through the history for the
Activision Blizzard.
Good on you, my guy.
Right? Thank you for the 20, Extras. So as of right now, that deal is still in place, and it's a bundle deal that's also giving Activision Blizzard cheaper servers for their games because they're hosted on Google Cloud. You have to wonder if now they're going to switch over to Azure, which is owned by Microsoft. But the scope of this deal, this was a small piece of the big picture, which is why everybody who was complaining about Overwatch would be like, it needs to be on Twitch. Like, the league was such a small part of like the hosting costs and all of this other stuff that the league had, right? It was a very small piece. So if you didn't know that, it was a bundle deal. And I believe to this day, because that deal was in place, Activision Blizzard is still using Google Cloud as its hosting service in the cloud. So that was an important note that was not mentioned that people don't really know. And I please fact check that, but that was I had a little bit more behind the scenes talking to the YouTube people about it previously. So just
highest
story time
average
for everybody.
audience of any channel on Twitch. What we've learned is a couple of things. One is you need to go for the biggest audience, right? And if we were to do a do-over, I would say let's not go to YouTube or go exclusive just yet.
Dude, there's also a big change that the OS League is just gonna die completely. Like that's a big change.
Get this fucking shit on my screen.
Guys, we've been watching the coronavirus for weeks now, continuing to see the market action trade around the updates we get, but the coronavirus is also hitting esports, as popular gaming leagues like Activision Blizzard's Overwatch League and Tencent Holdings' Riot Games.
Because it seems the coronavirus has spread to South Korea and more countries as well.
Yeah, man, the disease that made gaming more popular than ever is why this fucking league died.
Seoul Dynasty homestands will be canceled.
The homestands, losing out on homestands sucked, but gaming was more popular than ever. You could absolutely do these online, and it shouldn't matter if people care about your game.
Spreading, they had to speed run packing all of their stuff in order to make a last-minute flight back. This is scary stuff, man.
COVID struck at the worst possible time for Overwatch League. We were just moving into what was the long-term dream of the Overwatch League, was to have homestands to really make this city-based model work.
There's more to come after the break. What's that? I think, yep.
These were lit, though. I acknowledge it. These were lit.
If that had been able to happen, that would have been magical for the Overwatch League, and it could have been an incredibly different future from what we're seeing now, because that was the grand vision.
There were a lot of changes with the matches moving online. What was the biggest takeaway for you guys in terms of adjusting to these new situations?
Gosh, I hated having to wear my mask everywhere. It was so hard to breathe in that thing.
So it's not really as humane.
I'm always so congested,
Despite
too.
some arguments that COVID actually extended the OWL's lifespan, ultimately it put the biggest, most interesting thing about the league on the back burner indefinitely. And that was devastating. Eventually, the pandemic began to ease off. Maybe that could have been a chance to see the league return to its original plans, but instead, Activision Blizzard had to deal with another sort of illness, the kind that rots companies from the inside.
Frat boy culture. That is how Activision Blizzard is now being described here in this new lawsuit filed by the California Department of...
Something the Overwatch team had nothing to do with, mind you. This had nothing to do with the failure of the league. Nothing. This is, I'm not flaming anybody here, but anybody who points to this as why the league failed, nonsense.
Fair employment
Complete
and
nonsense.
The agency alleges that male employees play video games during the workday while delegating responsibilities to female employees, engage in sexual banter, and joke openly about rape, among other things.
So they're making the girls do all of the work while they talk about rape and harassing
So
them.
terrible.
I saw a lot of people just want to boycott
Those guys
the
need to
league
go
when
outside,
that news
bro.
started coming out, all of the internal Blizzard struggles. It really just did more damage, and the sponsorship end as well. We had all these different sponsors, and now poof, it's all gone.
The danger here.
It's almost like they were waiting to leave because the league didn't do what people said it would. Like, listen, the lawsuit was just a thing that these sponsors could point at to say, oh, we wanted to get rid of you, so we're not going to get involved. That's all it was. That's literally all it was.
Is YouTube go, you know what? We don't want to be associated with you.
A symptom of the
T-Mobile
illness.
don't want to be
Absolutely.
associated with you.
Absolutely.
Coke don't want to be associated with you.
Brands like that were not putting money in anymore, and of course that's going to hurt, the bottom line. If you've got teams all around the world,
because the average consumer would not differentiate. I personally know people that stopped watching Owl because of Blizzard BS. Yeah, but if the game was good, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have sunk the ship, right? That was simply the straw that broke the camel's back when there was an entire hay bale on top of them already, right? So to point to that specific thing, be like, this is why the league failed. It's just wrong. It's completely wrong.
and you're spending money to bring DJ Khaled to perform at your finals, and sponsors are pulling out because of the news that's breaking that
Exactly,
the
Hero
company
Strafe,
might
exactly.
have been like an absolutely horrific workplace for women to be in. I don't understand how you could then keep an expensive esports league up while that's going on.
For a long time, I think they've just been a horrible company. They have not been that golden age Blizzard people like to pretend
Facts.
that they still are. It is a company that is so far out of touch and so corrupt that it's gross.
It was a bummer. It was a bummer to see, that happen to League because, as far as I'm aware, that part of the whole machinery at Blizzard Activision didn't really deserve that hit,
Facts.
So
Facts.
They certainly felt the
Facts.
effects, right? The sponsors leaving through, no fault of their own. So I think
Facts.
they sort of ended up being kind of like
Good people
secondary
to league.
victims
Good
to the
people
whole
to league.
situation, right? Where, they were also very negatively affected by all this happening.
And what's even perhaps more
He wasn't supposed to
sad
be the one
to
there.
acknowledge is that a lot of devs that you might find to be heroes, I find to be heroes of mine, may have known about this all along and maybe even participated in it. It's horrible. And
I can tell you right now, there is not a Blizzard dev that was my hero. I can promise you that, all right? Jeff Goodman, not my hero. Brigitte, come on, get her out of the game.
Even as public outrage over the harassment suit and internal
Also, by the way, question, did we ever find out what was true and what was not in that suit? It was supposed to go to court. That's what because I talked about it a lot, and I was like, listen, guys, like, I have been on the internet long enough to know that things that just get said online are not always true. I want to know what actually happened and what didn't before I make any conclusive decision. I'm sure there was a settlement to hush the controversy. Yeah, but like, even if there's a settlement, like, it was filed by the state. They can't just flow it. Like, it's not like this wasn't like a civil. So like the state filed this. This was a public affair. We never found out.
threatened to tear Blizzard apart, players were getting fed up with the lack of meaningful changes. Worse yet, Blizzard seemed to be focusing on Overwatch 2 instead of looking for ways to improve the original game.
They were moving over to the Diva, just going to be duplicating that up, but Jexa now finally unleashing that support ultimate he was saving. It's more than enough to try and clear them away, and Violet falling means there's going to be a lack of heals. That self-destruct as well.
Maybe this is going to be a hot take. I think this shit is the worst thing to happen to Overwatch. This shit is f***ed up. It is not fun. It is not skill. It is fucking bullshit. It is dog shit. This is so bad. I don't know, because people are gonna say, oh, what about Brig release? Or what about fucking goats? Or no, this is so bad.
There was no lights in that tunnel. Like that tunnel was pitch black. We were doing more than fumble in the dark. We were running into walls. Like it was just double shield. There was no hope. There was no communication. Zero. Nothing at all.
And once again, Blizzard seemed fixated on the wrong problems.
Overwatch has always been played with 2 teams of 6 players. Overwatch 2 will be played with 2 teams of 5 players.
Holy shit!
I think it's going to suck in the long term for off-tank players, because inevitably it will mean that we're probably going to see some tank players getting shafted and going to be losing their jobs in some capacity.
I would say it looks better than it did before, but there's a long fucking way to go. There's no way that this is the work that had been done in like 2 years. There's just no way.
A lot of people were just kind of frustrated in losing out on what we had in Overwatch 1. One of the biggest draws that they had for the game was the fact that it was a 6v6 arena shooter, not a 5v5 like every other game out there is kind of been. So I think there's a lot of disgruntled people losing out on things like that, not wanting some of their favorite characters to be reworked because you might have to learn a completely different play style depending on what hero you like to play.
You're literally cutting an entire role. It's like baseball being like, now we don't have a shortstop. All of a sudden they cut a role out and teams have to adjust.
There is a community that wants a lot of Overwatch 1 back, and they think a lot of the magic was lost in 5v5. Whether or not that can be fixed with tanks being updated or supports being nerfed, we'll see. We'll see through the next year. Like if it doesn't get better the next year, like I think more and more people will start to realize like maybe we did have it better.
And even when Overwatch 2 did come out, the promised and highly anticipated PvE mode never materialized at all. The player base started to spiral.
With everything we've learned about what it takes to operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on that original vision for PvE that was shown in 2019.
There was no need for Overwatch 2. It was a cash grab marketing scam that made them abandon the first game for years and just try to cash grab reskins, an upgraded shop. Anybody who tries to tell you that this has not been the biggest manipulation and scam in multiplayer gaming history is lying through their teeth.
Crisis after crisis had eroded the foundation of the Overwatch League. A lethal combination of unrealized potential, unfulfilled promises, and unrelenting monetary issues.
And that, by the way, that is Bobby Kotick's fault. Like, I will put blame where I think it's deserved. I don't think Team 4 should be blamed for that cash grab at all. Because you know why? Like, listen, I think they have the wrong vision for the game. I'm not going to deny they care about the game. Obviously, they care. They wouldn't want that scenario. That was all Kotick. That was all executives. I know the type of guys that would make that decision. That was not Team 4. The only thing Team 4 has wrong is their vision for the actual gameplay. They still actually give a shit about the game, obviously. I've never said they don't care about the game, I don't think. At least Team 4 themselves. I think they just have the wrong vision for the game. And so that's where it's very important. That is all Bobby Kotick. All Bobby Kotick. 100%. Just trying to cash out before he gets his Microsoft signing bonus.
Threatened to snuff out what was supposed to be the most important thing esports has ever done. As reports of mass layoffs on the esports side began to surface, it was time to admit that the death of the Overwatch League was no longer
refer to your own statement as facts, isn't it? Vinny G, are you going to act like Overwatch 2 wasn't a cash grab? The only thing that got updated was the shop. The only feature that was objectively better in Overwatch 2 was the shop. Our career profiles are gone. We lost all of our stats. Your border is gone in game. The gameplay is worse in general and more dumbed down. PvE didn't come out. They didn't even promise it. It was the worst reviewed game on Steam of all time, and you're going to tell me my comment is self-serving? What? I didn't realize I was playing Among Us. We've got an imposter, boys. I wasn't saying you are wrong. I agree with you, but that wasn't my point. Then you have no point. What kind of comment is that? What? Yeah, you're right about everything you said, but wouldn't you say that's self-serving? What? What does that mean?
An if, but rather a when.
What?
More so than anything else, the legacy of the league is going to be, as sad as it may be, a legacy of failure of doing, as an American, biting off more than you can chew.
I'm just saying the truth.
Maybe
so
going
I don't know
a little
what to
bit
tell
too big without really having the framework, the infrastructure,
I
the
miss Among
management.
Us.
I mean, I've heard so many horror stories
Among
about
Us was
Overwatch
great.
League management,
I love
whether
Among
it's
Us.
the orgs or the teams.
We need to play
and I
Among
think
Us.
that, like, obviously it's a bit of a caution that, you need to make sure that you have the foundation, the fan support.
Not to take away your update, the graphics engine was updated, a bunch of small stuff. You mean the graphics update that let them add sunset maps that a lot of the time are actually worse for gameplay in both, not just Overwatch. They did it in Warzone as well. Sunset Rebirth, where you literally couldn't see anything in a game that's objective is to shoot the other player. Like, this is my hot take. I really hate sunset maps and like different lighting maps that actually obstruct my vision from visual glare to make it more realistic. Like, I want to see the player. Now, I will say, there's only a couple Overwatch maps that are like that, but oh my goodness, Sunset Rebirth Island in Warzone 1 was so bad. It was so much worse. That one particularly was a really grave offender, but I do see what you're saying, buddy. I will acknowledge
the
what you're saying.
leadership that you need to be able to run something this big.
It doesn't help that the league was only in place for 2 years before a global pandemic
Hollywood
happened.
Eichenwald.
It doesn't help that
Hollywood Eichenwald, where Zarya literally blinded you.
midst of that, they
From her
were
beam.
behind the scenes working on a not sequel, then sequel, everything
Gibraltar, where you couldn't
changed
see
kind of
anything.
thing. It is kind of like a perfect storm of shit that would kill an esports league.
Switch to Verizon. It starts at $25 per line, guaranteed for 3 years.
Now, it didn't seem as if Blizzard was ready to announce its plans for Overwatch Esports at or around the 2023 Toronto Finals. But the writing was on the wall. This was going to be the league's last hurrah.
It's probably better for the health of Overwatch Esports and probably better for the health of the players that it's dying, just because the format in its own, it's just not self-sustainable. It was inevitable at some point, so rather than later.
I think it's probably a lesson for people in terms of the ambition behind like what esports is. I think that like people presumably expected Overwatch League to become like a multi-million like sports rival. I think it just can't hit the heights that maybe we expected for it. And I think probably when you start to put in buy-ins of like 20, 30 million, the return on investment was going to be difficult.
Overwatch League has been a very ambitious project from day one, and a decent part of that ambition has been fulfilled. A lot of that has been left on the
I didn't know
table.
Avral's name was Kevin Walker.
In an alternate timeline,
That's a cool
can only
name.
imagine what that would have looked like.
Yo, Avral's name kind of sounds like he'd be like in a Jack Reacher movie. like imagine a blockbuster movie. It's like Jack Reacher, like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, but it's just fucking Avril walking out with like explosions behind him and shit. I could see it.
Down as it could have been amazing, ended up being underwhelming. Because the idea was great that there should be a proper league.
I fucking
for
love Avril,
esports
bro. He's a
and
straight shooter.
Proper managed ecosystem for pro
Even
players,
if we don't
where
agree
they
on
feel
everything.
job security, where they feel safety, where they can kind of grow without fear of, well, if we don't win this tournament, we're out of a job.
I think, unfortunately, that people are going to look at the Overwatch League as an example of what not to do.
Michael's
And it's
awesome.
hard
Michael's
not
fucking awesome.
to look at it that way from how the league has went.
I had such high expectations and high hopes for this when I started. I mean, I moved halfway across the world for it. I completely changed my career for Overwatch. I really believed in it. Given everything that's happened with the league, teams are already pulling out, right? I mean, it's probably better if Overwatch League goes away after this finals. And I want to be clear that that's not saying Overwatch Esports should go away. I think Overwatch Esports can go through.
No, you're good, Vinny.
kind
You're
of
good, buddy. No
a
worries.
resurrection almost, right? Where it's like now we're going to be able to start building things again in sort of a more grassroots, genuine esports
It's all good
way.
if we disagree, man. No
The
worries.
Overwatch League gave orgs the option to vote on whether or not they wanted to continue playing in the current system or cut their losses, take a payout, and withdraw. They all chose the latter, nailing shut the Overwatch League's coffin for good.
They are all amazing individuals and really did deserve better. Unfortunately, though, the powers that be that were much stronger than them. And I think Overwatch could have been amazing in that department, but they really fumbled the bag. And they didn't fumble it once. They fumbled it, and then they fumbled it again. It's insane how many bad decisions Overwatch League made over the years.
The biggest swing taken in the history of esports turned out to be a failure. Overwatch Esports will, of course, persevere, but the gargantuan, ambitious Overwatch League that was supposed to change esports as we know it is no more.
With this game and with its esports,
and that's simply because the game itself wasn't that game. The game had to be the NFL. It had to be the football of sports, right? That's what it had to be, or at least had to be basketball. It had to be baseball. It had to be one of the top 3 or 4 games in the world to make this happen. But compared to the rest of the games, it ended up being freaking cricket. Actually, cricket's massive. I take that back. It wasn't even a big sport. It ended up being some minor league sport because the game itself, frankly, wasn't that good. And Team 4, specifically Team 4, took the game away from the direction where it could have worked. Now, Bobby Kotick making Overwatch 2 and all of the blunders that the IP had and Activision Blizzard had ultimately sped up the process of the failure that would end up happening, right? But inevitably, it was going to fail with the direction the game was balanced, right? At some point in time, it wasn't going to work. At some point in time, it was going to go under. So, you know, it's just very, very sad to see that.
See massive potential, but then you just see failure to deliver. And it's always from upper management positions, and it's always dropping people who are on the ground actually doing the good work. But there was definitely interest, and this is what makes it sad, I think, with Overwatch League.
The community remains as
cricket's
passionate
super
as
popular.
it's ever been. The fans that stuck with Overwatch through thick and thin are still here, cheering for what's coming next.
The hype that it was generating at the start, the overall interest was so crazy, and I think with this being such a unique model, there was so much potential for it to really thrive.
Here's why it makes me so damn mad. Dude, I was villainized in this community for a very long time for saying that the direction they were taking the game was going to make this happen. And I'm not going to make this all about me. This is not all about me. But my point being, you just have to leave it all on the field, you know? Forget what people say. Forget what people think. Speak your mind and just be happy that it happened. I saw a sign in there that was like, yo, just don't cry that it's over. Be happy that it happened. And that's a good way to look at life, you know? But there's no surprises here. I think that Overwatch League absolutely could work, and I think a franchise esports league could work. But the biggest challenge that it's going to face that traditional sports don't is that they're going to have to fight to make sure the game stays relevant constantly, right? Because games, unlike traditional sports, have rule changes, updates all the time to maintain player interest. So you have to make sure those updates not only maintain the competitive spirit that would allow a league like this to work, but also garner player interest and keep people interested in the game. And that, at a fundamental core, that's step one to making sure that this could possibly work. And Overwatch failed that at every single turn. Right? Samito on his villain arc finally ended. Unfortunately, I was proven right, which was worst case scenario for me, because the reason why I argued so adamantly about all of these things was to avoid all the tears on stage from my colleagues that I saw, because these were all people I came up alongside, right? It was to avoid all that. I was totally fine with being the villain so long as people weren't going to lose out on their jobs, so long as my buddies that weren't grinding the game with me day in, day out, that wanted to make the league, that ended up making the league, that came up in my contender season, that were in the Get Money Discord with me, that were all my boys, my dogs, could make the league and go make a career for themselves and make a goddamn name for themselves. But no. You know, I was willing to fall on that sword. I didn't care because it made the world a better place in my mind, right? I don't give a shit if people look at me as a hero or a villain. I'm going to try to do what's right because it's right regardless of what people perceive me as, because that's what it means to be a man, in my opinion, right? That's how I was raised, right? That's that old school Kentucky in me, man. That's how my grandparents or my parents and my grandparents raised me, right? So I didn't give a shit. It just sucks to see good people pay the price because of bad decisions, and it always will suck, but sometimes you just got to hang up the cape and accept it for what it is. Another great video from the score. They covered it beautifully as per usual. Great people over there. Okay.